Hi everyone. We are happy to share our participatory action research project titled as Adaptive Innovation and Climate Action, a PAR with students, social entrepreneurs and community actors to the esteemed audience here. Myself and Dr. Devika Shashdevan, we are faculty at the Center for Livelihoods and Social Innovation, School of Social Work at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. So for our project, there were mainly three stakeholders. There were the students and two alumni startups, which we term as social enterprises, and the community actors in which the social enterprises were working with. Our project goals were also designed accordingly. So with respect to the students, our objective was to promote awareness and develop the capacities of social work students to undertake participatory action research projects towards meaningful climate action initiatives. And with respect to the social enterprises, we had the following objective of strengthening alumni networks and social enterprises in facilitating climate action initiatives at the grassroots through their startups and social innovations. At the community level, we had the objective of strengthening community actors to enhance their adaptive capacities and entrepreneurial capabilities to livelihood and environmental uncertainties at the local level. In this video, I am going to focus on how we worked with the students and what was the capacity of the university to impart climate education through action research to social work students and how they took that learning back to the field and returned to the classrooms. So the whole project here was guided by the adaptive innovation model, which is an action research model specifically evolved in the context of climate change adaptation. So what is adaptive innovation? Adaptive innovation refers to people-centered innovation processes. Here we believe that we could strengthen the collective action among community actors and other stakeholders as well to analyze their own situations, be it social, economic, ecological transitions, and through shared conversations, we could build constructive partnerships with multi-stakeholders, create an environment for dialogue as well as ideation, and in that process develop certain working models or prototypes which could be then observed closely, iterated, reflected, and piloted to emergent contexts. So this whole adaptive innovation in a sense is very situated, context specific and reflective and evolving, ever evolving or developmental, and is the core is that it is committed to the values of care, justice and solidarity. So in my book on climate change and adaptive innovation, I have detailed about this adaptive innovation model, and it is that model we have tried to implement in this particular action research project as well. Here you see the diagrammatic representation of the whole adaptive innovation model. At the core of adaptive innovation model is the values guiding ethical adaptation, the values of justice, care and solidarity. Then there are 6 processes or phases of adaptive innovation, starting from situation analysis to micro mobilization to dialogue ideation, followed by action framing, piloting, and then emergence. So here we try to look at reflective practice also, engaging with reflective practice also, reflection for action before starting the project. reflection during the action when we are in the sites of practice involved in our field work, and after which there is again reflection on action when we have implemented specific phases of the project. This the uniqueness of this particular model is there is also scope for theoretical interpretation through actor interface analysis and other theoretical dimensions as well. And in the following two slides, I will also brief you on the ethical adaptation values as well as the theoretical paradigms that shape this particular research. Our whole project was guided by the following value systems of justice, care, and solidarity. So, when we are in the field and working with both humans and non-humans, we need to look at not only distributive forms of justice, but also the notions of everyday justice that is addressed through both representation and recognition. And to engage in such a form of everyday justice, we cannot neglect everyday care. And that care is not only between human beings. Within human beings itself, we need to see between the youngsters and the elderly population, as well as between humans and non-humans, and across caste, class, gender groups. And this is where we believe that collectivizing through the practice of caring solidarity would help us in achieving better outcomes through adaptive innovation. As we progressed in the field, each student began to also engage reflectively with diverse theoretical approaches, while some of them chose the pathway of post-human perspectives, of looking at our action research with humans in a more than human world, and the entangled way of life between humans and non-humans, be it agriculture, be it coastal ecosystems, be it cyclonic environments, or looking at the feminist perspectives of intersectionality, not only in terms of gender, but also largely in terms of caste and class, among farming communities and among people who are impacted by climate change events, especially the homeless communities. Apart from posthumanism and intersectionality, the other two important theoretical perspectives that emerged later on was the perspective of everyday justice and commodity frontiers, where climate change itself is opening up new arenas of capital accumulation and profit maximization at the cost of everyday justice practices. These were the prominent phases of the adaptive innovation is the action research that we followed. We began with analyzing the situation about who are the various actors interfacing in different contexts, social, economic, political, ecological, etc. And slowly, based on the need that was emerging, we started mobilizing small groups and networks, be it seed keepers or be it homeless groups, and try to build, in a sense, a kind of a micro mobilization. And once we started organizing them into small action research groups, then we ventured into ideation through a dialogic process about what are the various needs and what could be done at this particular point of time, and how could it be done, what should be its visual or other sensational understanding about those ideas being implemented through action framing. And then we piloted those ideas in a small scale and also looked at the intended and unintended consequences that emerge through the various phases. So, starting from situational analysis to micro mobilization to dialogue ideation, action framing to piloting to emergence, this was a continuous spiral of action research process that we engaged with. Let me describe you now about the diverse adaptive innovation pathways, especially the curricular component which helped us to proceed with these various adaptive innovation phases, working with students, social enterprises, and community actors through various action research processes, including storytelling, oral histories, photo voices, dialogue conferences, etc. So one of the key pillars of our action research was that we had a curricular backing in terms of learning and reflection as part of our livelihood program. So throughout the learning engagement with students, we aimed at creating shared conversation spaces and then trying ideas through a process of dialogue. This time largely we also relied on storytelling as a practice and at the same time reflecting on the stories told by different groups of people on their everyday lived experiences. And the three important pillars of our curricular engagement as part of the fieldwork was a 2 weeks rural practicum, a 6 weeks livelihood innovation lab, and 4 weeks block fieldwork, which really gave enough space for trying out, drawing inspirations, iterating, and carrying out the fieldwork. To begin with, four of our students were placed with Hooga Seed Keepers Collective. Hooga Seed Keepers is a startup by one of our center's alumni who has also been keenly interested in climate resilience and natural farming. So, Hooga Seed Keepers basically works towards the conservation and restoration of native seeds and the biodiversity involved with native seeds based livelihoods, which all have almost been disappearing in different parts of the country due to massive hybridization of agriculture as well as chemical intensive farming and climate change. So, as part of a climate resilient action, we believe that the efforts of Hooga to conserve native seeds and heirloom seeds and through that restore natural farming practices could add to existing efforts, ongoing efforts on climate resilience. So, four of our students were placed with Hooga. Two of our students were placed with Goodliving.eco, a much younger startup with a vision to make climate smart housing in affordable and accessible for the marginalized. And their location was in a highly political, highly complex space, but very much affected by cyclonic storms and flooding.
So before going to the field for their rural practicum, the students had 5 to 6 sensitization workshops, largely facilitated through storytelling and peer reflection and group discussions. We started the first week with self-reflection and self-awareness sessions on who am I, where am I, and where do I want to go, followed by which, after a week of introspection, they came back to reflect on who are we, where are we, and where do we want to go. So, thus building into the collective team mindset. And they also started telling stories about everyday justice and caring solidarity, and how do they locate the binaries in everyday life. So then we progressed into the movie watching, trying to understand those movies that are similar to their fieldwork contest, and storytelling and reflections on those stories. And after that, the exercise was that they need to go into in search of stories similar to that is close to their heart. They are able to tell more stories about people impacted by climate change. They came out with very interesting and exciting and introspective stories about people's life impacted by climate change. And after these 4 to 5 sessions, we then started interfacing with the social entrepreneurs and listening to their stories from the field and trying to see what kind of a field are we going into, what kind of sites of practice are we getting into, and what preparations we need to go before we get into the rural practicum. So these kinds of a reflection and orientation shaped our fieldwork even before we starting to go to the field.
So when I reflect back on our PAR journey, I think we started with orientation. So firstly, we were placed with our faculty, Professor Sunil sir. So that itself was an exciting opportunity for me because that was the first time I was I was coming under his supervision for fieldwork because he did not take any classes in the first year. So that itself was an exciting factor. So then we started with orientations before the to understand what this project is, what PAR is, and what are the organizations and projects that were coming under this project. So for this, we used to have online meetings where the 6 students placed under him would come together. So initially, I remember he presented us with the organizations and giving us the choice to choose which one we would like to work with. So the two of us chose Good Living, and the other 4 chose Hooga Seeds. So there itself, we had a dilemma because we were like, okay, most of them are going for seed collective. Is Good Living a little Good Living a little boring, or like why is it that just the two of us ended up choosing Good Living? But then I was very convinced of my own decision because I had because sir gave sir introduced us to the organizations and its founders, which is also an exciting factor because these are our alumni. So we had direct engagement with them also in the online meeting. So from that plus the plus our own research through the website information, etc., I was sure that I wanted to work with Good Living. I remember that after then the orientation process began, and during each meetings through sir tried to make us self-reflect and about our awareness on climate change itself, because climate change was the larger area where this project was based on, right? So he tried to make us self-aware, and he also started with assessments. So for each meetings, he would ask us to rank ourselves with regards to our awareness regarding climate change. And there was self-reflection, there was also collective reflection, and there were storytelling sessions where he would ask us to come prepared for the subsequent meetings, so that we could share with each other regarding different stories of climate change from around the world, etc. So that is what I remember, and I reflect back thinking about the orientation phase, which is the starting for the which served as the starting for the entire process. How was it for you?
Yeah. So the orientation phase, just like Adi has said, what I remember is like Professor Sunil would say for us to look back to stories which are related to climate change. So in each of our sessions, we will come up with stories to share, and from that stories, Sir would help us to build slowly on the concept of participatory action research and how we can link these stories to several concepts. For example, from my stories helped me to understand a term called energy justice, which was completely new for me. I knew what is energy, what is justice, but putting those two terms together, and then how will we explain it, and how energy justice is related to climate justice, that I didn't know. So Likewise, every one of us had, our own individual journey during the pre-orientation phase. There we understood about new concepts. So from the pre-orientation phase, through the storytelling and our sessions, we had our individual goals and our collective goals. The collective goals were mostly aligned to the objectives of the organization, and individual goals were like for our greater understanding of the context and climate change. So after pre-orientation, we had 2 weeks of rural practicum where we had to stay with the community. So our community was staying in a village called Vilupuram, which is along the Tamil Nadu coastal area, which is like a cyclone-prone area. And we had a village where we worked around the irregular tribes also.
The rural practicum, and 4 of our students were placed with Hooga and 2 students with Goodliving.eco. So the first step within the rural practicum in both the sites of practice, that is in Hooga and Good Living, was to become familiar with the everyday livelihood practices of communities over there, households over there. Simultaneously, students were also engaged in understanding the key aspects of the society. So, for the situational analysis, we began with the framework called Casio, which is more borrowed from the critical realist framework by Roy Basker. So, here, which we have modified accordingly, and here the context of everyday practice, the different actors involved, be it the farmers, be it the seed keepers, men, women, children, landless households, the Dalit communities, homeless households, the Gram Panchayat, other local governing institutions, the bureaucracy, departments of the state, all these were the stakeholders or the actors involved. The different power relations that are the structures that were both as enablers and constraining agents in the field. We explored that as well, and what interventions have happened in the past and how they have shaped the outcomes. So these were the broader framework in which we looked at the situation analysis. And as we progress with our fieldwork, we also narrowed down to what are the main problems, needs, who are the climate impacted groups, who are the most vulnerable among them, and what are their concerns, and what strengths do they have, and what barriers they have in their adaptation to climate change as well as in everyday livelihood practices. So this characterized our situation analysis. And some of the important methods that enabled us for the situation analysis was household visits and conversational interviews with members of the family. Oral histories with the elderly population were very important to understand the trajectories that rural economies have taken, especially with farming, and especially the trajectories of becoming homeless and the impact of climate change in terms of floods and cyclones or drought or prolonged rains, etc. Key informant interviews were also important, especially for us to understand who are the most vulnerable and why. Later on, as the situation analysis progressed and as we started building more a good rapport with the communities, we also started engaging with group discussions and transect walk. A very unique aspect of our methodology was that we were also guided by the post-humanist frameworks, and we tried to apply that in that theoretical standpoints into practice, which also emerged as a methodology of its own, which I would also say is an uniqueness of this project. And here we started not by following people, but in both the sides. In Hooga, we started following seeds or the native seeds in search of the native. And in Good Living, we started following homes or those people without homes. So these were the two different spatial and non-human context in which we started trying to understand the grassroots realities. And I believe that the method and the approach revealed some unique ways of working with climate change adaptation. At the end of the situation analysis, we could also organize volunteers and interested groups, what we term as micro mobilization, towards starting to engage in a dialogue of what the contest is and what could be done. So this phase was also characterized by methods like group discussion, informal shared conversations, and formal need analysis. Rural practicum, students returned to the campus and they presented the various findings and understanding of the field realities, especially through the contextual analysis, as well as trying to see that what are the chief concerns and what could be done when they go back to the field. And so after the rural practicum, it was vacation for a month and students returned to the campus for the new semester, and we commenced the Livelihood Innovation Lab, which is a 2-credit course where students get the opportunity, these 6 students get the opportunity to interact with their other classmates, that is around 20 students, and then it gets into a mode of weekly presentations of what the problem is, what could be done in that context. So students try out various frameworks like the log frame approach, participatory need analysis, and similar methodologies, and every week they try to brainstorm on what could be done, and including design thinking. And these presentations were largely mentored by the faculty of the center, and there had been a lot of iterations, lot of ideation, iterations, and brainstorming happening within the class, and through phone calls with the community members or with the organization representatives, with the founders of the organizations, and then they return to the drawing room again with revised ideas and refined thoughts. So this characterized the livelihood innovation plan, and the goal was that within 4 months of the course, the student should be able to come out with a livelihood innovation plan, both plan A and plan B, what they will be doing in the field when they go during August, September for the field work. So this was the main aspect of the Livelihood Innovation Lab. A key phase of the adaptive innovation process that shaped the Livelihood Innovation Lab was the dialogic ideation, and we were able to apply different methodologies to stimulate discussions and look at various permutations and combinations. So one of the key approach that we looked at was diffractive analysis, borrowing from Barrett, and so here the students started looking at that problem from different disciplinary perspectives. So they were social work students, but they started looking at it from agriculture science, human rights, and colonialism, ecological perspectives, biological perspectives, community perspectives, local governance perspectives. So, from different perspectives, we were able to understand the problem and trying to see that where is the convergence that we could take it up further. It was a complex process. It was not a very linear process, and but still, it was a process of good learning. This was also supported by lots of brainstorming among students, between faculty and students, between other actors of the organizations, and even community members. And students used various aspects like the idea canvas, peer consultations, participatory methods, etc., towards action framing of what could be done and how it will be actually like a prototype, how it will be when we go and implement that in the field. So all these aspects were happening during the Livelihood Innovation Lab. At the end of it, the students submitted the Livelihood Innovation Plan, and with those ideas in mind, they also started off for their block field work, which is of a duration of 1 month.
So after 4 months of brainstorming and developing the innovation plan, the two groups of students set out for their block field work. And prior to the commencement of the block field work, we also had a full-fledged action research workshops in which the different action research methodologies like photo voice, oral histories, convergent interviews, and other workshops, participatory workshops, were instructed to the students, and they also tried it before going to the field. And we could say that the block field work, in a way, was the piloting phase to implement one's ideas and the piloting phase of the adaptive innovation project. During the block field work, students at Hooga Seed Keepers network primarily aimed at strengthening the Seed Keepers network and documenting diverse knowledge and practices that were present at the community level, largely relying on indigenous knowledge systems. At the simultaneously, the students also started working with children both at the community level and at the school level, and it resulted in the formation of what is called as the Children's Seed Club, where children started first trying to understand what seed clubs are, what indigenous seeds, heirloom seeds, or native seeds are, why they have to be preserved, and what are their various morphological contests, and then slowly starting their own seed garden, trying to plant different types of seeds that were provided by Hooga, bringing their parents and having interaction between teachers and parents about why it is important to have indigenous heirloom seeds and crops. Apart unlike the home navigate smooth navigation, relatively smooth navigation of community practice with the farmers in Hooga, it was not such a smooth transition of working with different actors in good living. The reason being extreme weather events actually impact the poor and vulnerable in differential geographical, spatial, and scalable context. And each homeless family was actually situated not in a community setting. They were situated due to their own vulnerabilities at the margins of different communities. And within the same Gram Panchayat, you will find one family located in the north, while another family is located in the west or east. And thus, the notion of community itself didn't exist in this group. So they were largely climate impacted families, and more and more work was required to mobilize them and organize them into climate impacted groups rather than as communities in the begin with. So the group discussions, games, and brainstorming sessions, and also going more into a kind of a situation analysis and need analysis took more time during the block field work. And it is also very complex here because over a period since independence, the bureaucracy has been working in such a way that where the state is the provider of all welfare activities, and poor people can only access them if they bribe the officials. So this was the kind of a thing where corruption was percolated to the grassroots, and navigating across this and providing home to the homeless was a very complex exercise. And but at the same time, we were able to bring 12 families together and try to work with them towards understanding what is the grassroots level financial situation for housing and what can be done, what kind of a policy level intervention is required simultaneously along with participatory action research at the grassroots. So these kinds of reflections happened in Good Living. The block fieldwork culminated towards the fieldwork seminars where the different groups of students came and presented their fieldwork experience and learning, and to the rest of the class. And here they also engage in a kind of a theorizing the micropolitics of action research that happened in the two different settings. And for the people in Good Living, while it was more about unearthing the micropolitics of power and corruption, no, for the Hooga team, it was more about unearthing the messy labyrinths of caste and gender intersectionalities in the field and how they create binary positions, and which is very much rooted in even in forms of indigenous knowledge systems. So how do you work on these dimensions? And there were a lot of queries and concerns, and it is such reflection on practice with which we ended the field work.
So after the 2 weeks of rural practicum with a lot of new learnings, we came back, and we, as a part of our curriculum, has a course. It is Livelihood Innovation Lab, and we have incorporated whatever learnings we had from the rural practicum and whatever reflections and concepts we learned newly through Climate U Action Research into this course, and we presented in front of our whole class about climate change and how it is affecting the climate vulnerable population in Viluppuram district. Throughout our presentation, we tried to tell our class what actually is climate change and how differently it is affecting different sections of people. And we also, since we were working with tribal people and also the less privileged people, we had two dimensions to tell, even though they were like from a geographical area which were like close to each other. The how it affected the tribal group and the less privileged backward caste group was like, it was slightly different, so we were able to bring back that dimension to our class. Interestingly, what we could see was like after the whole presentation, even though other groups were not part of Climate U project, Professor Sunil and Dr. Divisha ma'am and all of our classmates were able to relate to climate change, with respect to each of the field contexts that were not part of Climate U project. So that was like a big insight, or like a takeaway, where we could understand that even though we were not focusing on climate as such, with other groups, we could reflect back on how it is affecting each community. And during our livelihood innovation lab, we try to understand how we can work on the problems or the challenges that we understood during our rural practicum phase. So that after the rural practicum phase, it was a phase of innovation, like what should we do with the community uh, in light of our larger collective objectives and our individual goals.
This action research had its own emergent properties and what we could call as both intended and unintended consequences of our initiatives. And some of that we planned and some of that we did not plan. And so it is in that context we need to see that what were these entangled outcomes that emerged, and which was another phase of reflection and reflective practice for us in this action research. We could locate emergence in the context of strengthening community leadership and widening the seed keepers network across intersectional groups of caste, gender, and class of farmers. And similarly, we were able to bring families together that otherwise has they were of possessing weak social capital. And one of the key aspects is that we were able to bring together climate impacted families, and through that collectivization itself we were able to strengthen the social capital of these families, and which is very important even when a next extreme weather event happens in that region. One important aspect that we realize in both the settings is that children, as the next gen guardians of the planet, have a very important role to play, and they are very creative, and they also understand the contextual specificities of their everyday life. And it is from both the current reality and their aspirations we could develop just adaptation strategies, and that is a very important learning. And now also in the field, the children are the taking up the mantle to take up climate resilient futures to the next level. We were able to stabilize the startups. For Hooga, it was about scaling up, while for Good Living, it is about rethinking their strategies about providing homes or moving more towards a policy level impact to be generated. So there were different um, uh, uh, there were different kinds of impact on both the social enterprises. And while Hooga got more visibility and it was able to scale up, Good Living believed in reimagining the futures through rethinking their strategic interventions. And here, the more and more youth, when they came to know from the university, at the university level itself, when they came to know about the potential of action research, they started joining our workshops, and which though even though they were not interested in the field of, they were not working in the field of climate change, they knew that they wanted to grasp the principles and methods of action research. And once they joined, they were not hesitant to learn more about climate change. They started participating in environmental discourses, climate justice discourses, and also taking up action research to their next level, like their dissertation projects, to other conferences, and they wanted to write papers, etc. Similarly, there were various other spin-off effects where we didn't anticipate that kind of a spin-off happening with from these two projects. So what happened is that while all these happened during the third semester, in the next fourth semester, more than 6 groups of students from the same batch, they went for their block fourth semester field work to different organizations that are working with environment and climate change, and started working on issues of water scarcity, afforestation, and forest-based livelihoods, etc. So that was something that we didn't aim at all to begin with. But when students came to know about the potential and also became aware about the seriousness of the impact, that is where I believe in climate tube-based project, where the universities play a real role in changing the awareness level and understanding of youth towards environmental justice and climate action, and not only understanding but changing the reality by creating more community-based, people-centered ecological justice initiatives. So I believe that that was one of the greatest spin-off of this project. Hooga, in the meantime, received a lot of recognition and rewards from both the state governments and corporate social responsibility initiatives. However, at some times we also reflect and say that it is more important to be rooted at the community level, and but at the same time, the government is also recognizing the initiatives taken up by these social enterprises. However, we are not romanticizing the whole initiative. There were a lot of conflicts and slowing down happening due to politics, the micro politics, and the intersectionalities of caste and gender, patriarchy, etc. And conflicts also come in the field, and sometimes we don't have immediate solutions to address that. Perhaps yet another phase of adaptive innovation is required to address these.
Good evening, everyone. I am Atul Raman, representing Goodliving.eco, a member organization under the Climate U and Tata Institute of Social Sciences, TISS Mumbai. In the context of the growing, tripling climate disasters like cyclones, floods, droughts, and extreme heavy rains, and the growing 1 billion population living in substandard housing all over the world, we start Good Living with a vision to ensure climate resilient and green housing becomes a mainstream, especially for the marginalized and climate vulnerable groups in climate prone disaster regions. Having said this, for us, the PAR was very important, came at the right time for us because we had just completed a pilot project with a design led approach to housing. And we had a lot of questions unanswered regarding what the climate change perceptions was. And under the auspices of Professors Tristan McCowan and Sunil Santa, we and the students of the universities like TISS Mumbai, we were able to design the research questions and the research program in such a way that in the first phase, the situation analysis phase, we were able to clearly identify the closed interweaved relationships between the intersectionalities of various households and how it links with their climate vulnerabilities and dilapidated housing conditions, their perceptions of climate change, what their aspirations are regarding wanting to build their own house, and what are the drivers and barriers in being able to build their own house. And subsequently, during the micro mobilization phase and the dialogic ideation phase, we with the community, we jointly understood that they would like us to work on more than a design-led approach, an approach where we would like to make existing housing finances available and accessible to them. And it was in this context that we understood the importance of multi-stakeholder approaches through government subsidies and rural housing finances, which will be explained in detail by our Chief Architect and CEO, Gauri Shanoy. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm architect Gauri Shanoy here, and I would like to add further to what my colleague Atul just mentioned. The participatory action research helped us in a lot of ways to understand the communities we are working with. Initially, we had a very beneficiary led approach, which limited our holistic approach to housing for climate vulnerable families. But by conducting participatory action research and understanding the drivers and barriers of the households we work closely with, we understood a very specific problem. This was that the households had access to various grants, loans, schemes at different times, but rarely all together. And if they had got all of this money at once, they would be in a much better position to build their own homes. This actually led us to pivot our existing model with a greater focus to make formal finance accessible at once in order to address the issue of climate resilient housing. We are very, very grateful for this opportunity at Climate U, and I'm sure we'll use these learnings even in our future.
With special focus on changing climate. In this context, we had students from Tata Institute of Social Sciences Bombay who came here to work with us on the action research project using an adaptive innovation approach. This project has been the most beautiful project for us to learn and to reflect on our activities on a day-to-day basis with the community with whom we are working with. The action research is one research methodology that could actually help us to blend with the community itself and bring in a very bottom-up way of working with the communities. Say, for example, at Hooga Seed Keepers, we had used one of the methods, which is having a dialogue conference with which is involved in one of the phases of the adaptive innovation model framework itself, which is dialogic ideation. As part of that, we had dialogue conference that was held, and we had diverse group of people who participated. Say for example, agriculture university students, we had teachers, government school teachers, we had university professors, and the grassroots level farmers with whom we do seed keeping in the community.
For the students and the faculty of the students of that particular batch, all this learning and experience culminated into a grand event, the annual CLSI annual Action Research Conference, in which they were able to engage with both theory and practice from the field, from the different action research projects, and they were presented in a professional and academic way. But at the same time, we are also engaging in discourses of how to create new forms of climate awareness and actionable models in their future areas of practice. So this was something very important, and the conference generated a lot of discourse. Professor Tristan himself gave the keynote address on the role of higher education institutions in sustainable development and climate action, and which was then well received, and following papers were debated and critically explored by senior professors, practitioners from the field, and doctoral scholars, as well as civil society activists. And the conference was well appreciated. Students also developed a very good confidence later on to develop papers and go to the field and explore adaptive innovation projects on their own. Even today, when we talk to these alumni students who are today at the alumni, and when we talk to them, they say that how they are taking the learning from these projects and these conferences back to the organizations where they are working with, and trying to work with local communities in strengthening indigenous knowledge systems, in mobilizing small groups of climate impacted groups, and working towards action framing and piloting. So the results are encouraging in that sense, though we understand that there's miles to go before we take a pause.
How did theories influence you? Could you talk about that?
I think posthumanist theory was a really strong backbone to at least how I was perceiving a lot of the action research that we were doing, because it started with a very confined idea of what commodification and acts of resistance would be. But then starting to look at how seeds were commodified, how indigenous farming practices were acts of resistance, not just the lives of people alone, but how the native seeds and even to say pests and of that area, how all of it is impacted by climate change and impacted by hybrid seed varieties. So for me, that was posthumanism really played a.
For me, I also think that initially when we went to the field, we took an anthropocentric approach. So we looked at the dispossession and displacement with regards to the farmers and the community members of it. But as you said, the posthumanist theory actually helped us to look into the dispossession and displacement of local knowledge. Then some of the recipes with the native food, some of the native species that have been forgotten.
Yeah.
So that is also, eventually,
And then the intersectional
Yes.
lens as well. Look at how, like, intersectionality and even knowledge hierarchies on who knows about farming practices, who is called a
farmer, yes. The Dalit farmers were not called as a farmers. Only the person who possessed the actual land was called as the farmers. And there even the Dalit farmers' knowledge was not considered as, knowledge.
And when actually the most interesting thing, and Anna and I discussed this when we were presenting our conference paper, is that the Dalit farmers, what they were practicing really brought together all of these theories.
Yes.
And what they were doing was really could be considered an act of resistance, but not a loud one, but a very quiet one in their day-to-day lives. It was completely not commodified.
Yes,
It was
the ethics of
posthumanist.
care
Yeah.
for like humans and non-humans.
Yeah, and just cultivating
keeping the seeds that they cultivated in their home gardens. They ate, they shared within their community.
That
And
was
they
all
saved
very
it.
natural for them.
Yeah.
And they considered the plants to be their own like daughter or son.
Yeah.